Okay, this reminds me of the day in August when we launched Right2Water in the Gresham Hotel. There was a similar sized attendance, and a couple of weeks later over 100,000 people marched on the streets outside in defence of water as a human right. And as we all know, on the 1st of November 2014, a few weeks later, upwards of 200,000 people marched in on 106 locations. This Wednesday, Right2Water will hold its third major event when we will be calling people from all over Ireland and indeed further afield, as you can see, to a People's Assembly outside our Parliament, the Dáil, at 1 p.m. Wednesday is International Human Rights Day, and we believe that water is a human right. Right2Water has been founded on the basis, one, we all agree water is a human right, and two, we are all going to protest and campaign until we have overthrown this domestic water charges double tax. We're joined here today by our colleagues, our friends from Detroit, Michigan, from the Detroit Water Brigade. And I'm not going to tell you about what's going on in Detroit. I know a little bit about what's going on in Detroit. But at Peace, Shu, Miko and Justin know quite a bit more. So you're going to talk to all of those. From our point of view, we are absolutely honoured to be hosting the Detroit Water Brigade for the week here in Ireland and for International Human Rights Day. We see this water campaign as part of an ideological journey at which we in Ireland are at the very start. Maybe step two, they're introducing meters that people don't want. They're trying to get people into contracts with a company that people already despise. And they're trying to force people into a situation where they have to pay twice for their water to a utility which is being teed up to make big profits, to turn our water into a commodity and ultimately to be sold off. We're at the beginning of the journey here, and the people in Detroit are well down that path. In Detroit in the last number of months, and indeed for the last number of years, the situation in relation to water and indeed industrialisation, or the lack of industrialisation, unfortunately, as it now is to some extent, and changes in the city have been very prevalent. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to talk to you about that from their own particular perspectives within the campaign. So I'm going to ask at Peace Makita. At Peace, thank you very much for coming. You're very welcome. And if you'd like to share with those here some of your observations on what's going on in Detroit and what it means to be here today and what you see the connections as being.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you all so much for coming and for having us. I would love to see Detroit kind of go to the direction that Dublin is in now, where there are no meters, we're not being charged for usage, and it can be as part of our tax system. In Detroit, that's not the case at the moment. We are charged twice for the utility of water, and that has caused a great crisis in our city. Myself personally, I'm a single mother of 5 children. I am a native of Detroit. I moved away for a few years and came back about 5 or 6 years ago and found out how, along with everything else that's happened to the city, that this water issue is very serious and very real. I found out firsthand. My water was shut off 3 times in the past, I would say 5 years. The first time my water was disconnected was because in Detroit, the property is charged, not the person. So if an outstanding water bill is left, the person who moves into the new person who moves into the property is responsible for the bill. So my water for my new home 5 years ago would not be connected because the person who lived in the home before me left an overdue water bill. So my water, we went at least a week without water the first time. Because of this, I had to come up with the money and come up with the means to pay the bill to get the water back on. About a year and a half later, the water department in Detroit started to pressure me about the safe meter. We've had, the meters are usually on the outside, they're usually manually read, but over the past couple of years, they've been putting in smart meters into people's homes. And so I was being pressured by the water department to get the smart meter. And I just didn't want it. I didn't think it was necessary. I knew if it went digital that, you know, my bill could go up and that, you know, it could possibly cause health problems because of the radiation and just a whole lot of different things. And once I started doing my research, I found out that in the state of California, that is exactly what happened. There's parts of the state of California that ban the safe meter because of these particular concerns that actually happened. So after much resistance, the water department finally said, we're not going to play with you anymore. We're putting the smart meter in or your water gets shut off. I continued to hold out as long as I could. And then finally came home one day and my water was off. So I had to make a decision. And, you know, of course, what do? You get your water back on, right? So I got the water back on. And then about a year and a half later, I fell into the same issue again with the water being off. But this time, it was because of non-payment of the bill. The bill was far too much for me to afford. I called the water department several times to try to make arrangements based off of what I could afford to pay, and that system was not available. Either you pay the full bill or you get disconnected. It's just that simple. And at the time, I couldn't afford it, so the water got shut off. And we went at least 2 or 3 months at that time without water. What does that look like? It looks like coming home from a hard day's work with your children. It's hot outside. Everybody wants to take a shower. Everybody wants to just cook dinner and, you know, just relax, and your water is off. So the most devastating thing is the psychological trauma that comes from that, of knowing that you have to face your family and say, hey, I wasn't able to afford this particular necessity, and so we have to go without it. In a country or in a space where it's truly not necessary, but it's just the rules type of thing. So that was very difficult for my children to understand. And then I, of course, had to go through just the whole psychological trauma of what do I do now? I'm already concerned about other bills and just general life issues, and now I have to figure out how to flush my toilet. You know, it added on a huge stress at a time when I really didn't need it. So I went a couple months without the water. First, I thought it would be on in a couple days, so I didn't think much of it. I just said, okay, we're going to have to make do. I got in touch with my neighbor, let them know what was going on. That was an easy conversation to have, but I let them know that my water was off. And he was more than willing. He's a retiree from the post office. He's on a fixed income, but he was more than willing to allow me to run a water hose from his house to my house next door. And then that's how I was able to keep water supplied for myself and my children. We got huge barrels, those 10, 20-gallon barrels from the recyclable bins, and filled those up and kept those, you know, in the home as much as we could to flush the toilet, to cook, you know, to wash ourselves, to do all of that. While I went around the city trying to find assistance, that's not there. The programs are set up, the interface of the program is set up, but when you go to the program and ask for assistance, there's no financial assistance available. So I had to basically ride it out, stay with family, because in the city of Detroit, if you go 72 hours without water, the state can come in and take your children from you. So it's a very serious matter. If you have disabled elderly people or anything like that, they can come in, the state will come in after 72 hours of no water and take your grandma in as a ward of the state. And then also when your water is shut off, according to the law, your property is immediately considered condemnable. So just by shutting someone off, you can literally dismantle an entire family in a matter of a week. So it was very difficult. I was able to get the assistance to get the water back on. My water has been on successfully now for 2 years. No more disconnects. But when I found out about the Detroit Water Brigade and the action steps that were being taken to help mothers like me, that's when I got involved. I'm just a resident from the city of Detroit wanting to do my part, and I think if everyone steps up and just does their part, then we can definitely make a change. But it's real important that those of you here in Ireland, in Dublin, really understand and respect the fact that this too can and will be you if you don't continue to stand up and fight for what you know to be true and what you know to be right for yourselves. Water is a human right. There's a state law that also says that, you know, it is illegal to deny an animal water, but there's no law in the books that says it's illegal to deny a human from water. So if you have a dog or a cat and you're not giving them water, then you can actually get a ticket. You can go to jail. You can, all these things happen to you. But if you're an actual person, if you didn't pay your bill, you go without water. We don't care if you just had a baby and you gotta breastfeed or you gotta make bottles. We don't care if you just got out the hospital and you are on dialysis. We don't care. You know, it really doesn't matter. It's just a matter of a piece of paper. So that was really difficult.
And then you die.
And then you die. So it's real important that whatever we can do to support systems that are actually in place and working and give us a visual of what we really want, then we're going to stand in solidarity. We're going to make sure that, you know, we do our part to let you know that this doesn't have to be you. But if you don't stand up, it will be you. That's all I have to say right now.
Great, thanks for this very personal experience. Justin Weddes is going to talk to us now about the economics and the finance, and I think you're going to mention the dreaded 4-letter word bond, Justin.
Thank you, Brendan. My name is Justin Weddes, co-founder of the Detroit Water Brigade, educator and activist, and I'm so thankful and proud to be here and to stand in solidarity with all of the water warriors in Dublin and across Ireland standing up for public water, for public access to water and water as a human right. At Peace spoke very personally and honestly about the effects of the commodification and the privatization of water departments, and I want to speak briefly to the causes and the symptoms, you might say. And for those who say that Detroit isn't Dublin, it doesn't relate, there's nothing similar or alike about the two, I would say Detroit is not Dublin and Dublin is not Detroit, but not yet. And that's why it's so important that today that we're here, that we speak with you, we learn from each other, so that you can avoid the many, many steps and problems that we faced and continue to face as a result of the privatizing of our water system. The Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, which serves not just the city of Detroit, but the entire southeast region of Michigan, about half of the residents of Michigan, over 4 million people, is a system that has piece by piece become commodified and privatized. And you see this most explicitly in the financing of the department. Although the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department is technically a public entity, a public department, it's completely privatized in its financing. And this has to do with the bonds that finance the department, its capital improvements, its operations. The bond financing of the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department has been a decades-long process that has found the department in deeper and deeper debt. The rates of those bonds are excessively high, bringing way too much profit and interest to those bondholders. There has been decades of mismanagement and corruption in the department. For example, the former director of the water department, Victor Mercado, is now behind bars under federal corruption charges for the sleazy contracts he awarded to his friends for the construction of water pipes and mains. These are just some of the examples of how a system becomes commodified and privatized. Today, the bad debt of the water department is so severe that 46% of the operating revenue brought in by people paying their water bills, 46 cents on every dollar of every water bill, goes directly to paying on bad debt. Not the principal even, but the interest on bad debt. And so while the city, by its own constitution, is prohibited from making a profit on water, as it should be, nobody should make a profit on water as an essential necessity of life. The bondholders are really the ones profiting. And this leads to a culture, a corporate culture, of short-term profit as opposed to long-term growth and long-term sustainability of a system that everybody relies upon, because everybody needs water, as NP said. And so we have to be very, very scrutinous of how our water systems are financed. Who controls the financing and the decision-making around water departments? Because the economics is the politics of water. How things are financed is how they operate and how they're run, and who ultimately controls the spigot, who ultimately controls the tap. I want to also just mention briefly the importance of democratic control and governance of these systems. The city of Detroit has essentially lost its democracy in the last couple of years under the municipal bankruptcy that was imposed by our state-appointed emergency manager. The emergency manager of Detroit, Kevin Orr, was appointed by Governor Rick Snyder of the state of Michigan against the wishes not only of the citizens of the city of Detroit, but an entire state that voted in a referendum not to allow him to do this, but he did it anyway. And it effectively removed all democracy in the city of Detroit. And so the mayor, the city council, all of the elected officials who are supposed to represent the people of the city of Detroit have been silenced, as have their voters, by the imposition of an emergency manager. And that emergency management extended even to the water system until recently, when the water was returned, at least in name, to municipal control. And that was only after months of intense protest with thousands of people in the streets, and Nico will speak as well to the direct action and the resistance that the people put up. And even today, as the department plans a regionalization, a so-called regionalization plan, we see again the severing of municipal democratic control of the water, and the removal of any kind of democratic accountability procedures and oversight of the department. And so we've lost essentially the control of our water system, and we don't want to see that happen to Dublin. We don't want to see a company like Irish Water, a semi-state company, or Veolia, who's now embedded secretly in our own water department under confidentiality agreements and what's the term? Gag orders from bankruptcy proceedings that they can't even say what they're doing in the department. We know Veolia's in the department. It's commonly known, but nobody knows what they're doing. Our only suspicion, and which is likely true, is that they're working quietly to privatize the system, to change the management structures, to change the financing again, to make the system less accountable to the people. We have to put these things to an end. We need to reverse this course, and you, as Ireland, need to stop this course before it is allowed to proceed, because we don't want you to get to the point where people are being shut off, where the water is being cut on people who just simply can't afford water rates that have increased by over 200% in a decade, in 2 decades. This is not the direction that you want to see your water system go. And so before Dublin becomes Detroit, it's time to stop it. It's time to reverse course. And we're here standing in solidarity with you and saying we want to support you in that struggle, and we want to share what we've learned, but also learn from you, so that we can together both build, on both sides of the Atlantic, water systems that are accountable to the people, democratically controlled, not commodified, not privatized, but kept public and made accessible and affordable for everyone. Thank you.
I wanted to say too, Miko will touch on it more, but the government is going to lie. So for all those fence sitters out there that are sitting trying to see like, okay, which side do I jump? Which side do I jump? The reality is they're going to tell you whatever they got to tell you. Yeah. But once they get up in there, it's going to be almost impossible, if not impossible, to get them out. So it's real important that you are aware of that. Miko can break it down.
Thanks, Justin. I think the analysis of what's going on in relation to the bond markets and the fact that a lot of the money they're trying to collect for water in Detroit is going to pay interest on bonds. I think that's a language that will resonate over the next week with the Irish people, as our government prepares annually to pay €8 billion simply on the interest of private debts that were socialised on the heads of every man, woman and child in this state in the last number of years. So, we can see from our point of view, water is being teed up as the next bubble. You'll excuse the pun. I'm going to ask Shu. She wants to be called Shu, isn't that right?